Hi and welcome back to Heimler's History. In the last few videos we've been focusing on Unit 5 of AP World History, and we've been focusing specifically on the Industrial Revolution. And in this video we're going to look at some governments around the world and whether they accepted the Industrial Revolution or they rejected it or some mixture of both. So if you're ready, I'm ready, let's get to it. Now before we get started, I will be remiss if I didn't mention that I just released a new resource to help you with your AP World History class and your AP World History exam. It's called the AP World History Ultimate Review Packet, and it's going to help you crush your AP exam harder than exposed industrial age machinery can crush an underpaid factory worker's femur. And if that's something you're into, then it's linked down in the description below. Okay, so governments in the Industrial Revolution. So as industrialization spread, many governments were faced with a difficult choice. Either they could hold on to their traditional values or they could industrialize and go modern. And I want to show you how that choice played out in two places in particular, namely the Ottoman Empire and Japan. And just for poops and giggles, let's start with our friends in the Ottoman Empire. Now the Ottoman Empire was in a rough way in the 1800s. In fact, their nickname during this time was the sick man of Europe. Now, why were the Ottomans sick? Well, first of all, other powerful European countries like Britain and France and Russia were pressing in on the Ottoman Empire on all sides to establish colonial holdings. Second, as power and wealth began to transition into the industrialized nations, non-industrial folks like the Ottomans began to see their power and wealth decline. And third, they had a string of weak and turdish leaders who did nothing to stop or rectify the first two things I just mentioned. And so, we've got ourselves a sick man in Europe. But enter Muhammad Ali. Not that guy, that guy. Ali was an Ottoman officer who rose to prominence during a little scuttle in Egypt. At this time, Egypt was part of the Ottoman Empire, but the Ottoman Sultan had largely lost control of the region because of the aforementioned turdishness. And so the local Egyptian leaders named Ali their governor, and because he had the backing of the people, the weakened Sultan could do little about it. And so under the leadership of Muhammad Ali, Egypt was brought into the industrial age. Ali oversaw the building of textile factories and arms factories and shipyards. And this is a good example of state-sponsored industrialization. Okay, now let's turn our attention to Japan. For about 400 years prior to this period, Japan had largely kept to itself. Hey Japan, we got a party going on, y'all want to come? No, I just need some me time. Okay, that's fine. You want to come later? No, I'm going to need about 400 years of me time. Stop looking at me. Now, the reason Japan was being all introverted was because they had developed a rich culture and wanted to protect it from outside influence, especially industrial influence. And they could see that to accept industrialization meant way more than building a few factories and opening themselves up to new trading partners. They understood that industrialization carried more than economic freight. It also carried cultural freight as well, specifically Western cultural freight. So to them, to accept industrialization was tantamount to accepting Western culture. And so the Western industrial powers honored Japan's introversion and just left them alone to be Japanese. Wouldn't that be hilarious if they were like that? No, I mean, if you recall, part of being an industrial nation is that you're making metric buttloads of goods for sale on the market. And when the people living in your country no longer have enough money to buy your stuff, you gotta find other markets. Our people told us they've had enough of our manufactured crap. Y'all want some? No. That's hilarious, because when you say no, I'm really hearing yes. And so Western powers began to press Japan hard to open its borders to trade. And maybe the most flagrant example of this happened in 1853 when the United States came knocking on Japan's door. And that year, a naval fleet of American destroyers floated into Japan's harbors. Commodore Matthew Perry got off the ships and asked Japan to open their doors to trade with the United States. And Japan said no. And after that, I can just imagine Perry taking his Japanese negotiators out on a little walk to show them his ships. Man, look at the guns on those ships. You know, those are the new Puxan shell guns. Those things could destroy whole towns and just leave everything in utter destruction and devastation. Anyway, good talk. So, needless to say, when Perry returned the next year, Japan opened their borders to trade with the United States. However, Japan quickly decided that they weren't going to be the victims of Western takeover like they saw happening in China. So, Japan went on the offensive. If they were going to be forced to trade with Western powers, at least they could take steps to guard the culture that they cherished. And how would they do that? By industrializing. Wait. What? They decided to industrialize just enough so they had the strength to protect the culture that they cherished. And so the process of Japanese industrialization and limited westernization became known as the Meiji Restoration. And let me tell you about a few government-sponsored reforms that occurred during the Meiji Restoration. They built railroads and regular roads. They abolished the long-standing social and political system of feudalism. And finally, Japan established a constitutional monarchy. And they paid for all this by jacking up taxes across the nation. And so there you have a second example of government-sponsored industrialization. Industrialization. Alright, that's what you need to know about Unit 5, Topic 6 of AP World History. If you want to get the AP World History Review Packet, here it is. If you want me to keep making these videos for you, then subscribe and come along. And finally, if you need any more help in Unit 5, then here's a playlist that will make all your dreams come true. Heimler out.